Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. My name is Chris Burns. I have a show on Euronews called The Network, and welcome to the European Ombudsman's annual event, interactive event called It's Our Europe, Let's Get Active. We have a very colorful and interesting panel of guests. We have two panels, actually. We have 180 minutes to do this. Normally, I have only 10 minutes during my show, so I have the luxury of time, but we do have a lot of things to discuss. And we are connected. We are connected to 30 European Parliament offices across Europe in 20 languages, thanks to all the interpreters up here, over your heads. And we also have a Twitter connection across Europe, so all those who are not even at those offices can get involved. The hashtag, I should say right away, is hashtag EYC, as in European Year of the Citizen, 2013, EO, European Ombudsman. And indeed, it is the Year of the Citizen this year. And I think this can add a sense of urgency because next year we have Parliament elections, European Parliament elections. And this sense of urgency is because, let me add a couple of headlines. One is we saw a couple of weeks ago an election in Croatia, which is about to join the EU. And what was its turnout? It was 21%. And what have we seen in the previous elections of the European Parliament? We've seen a steadily declining voter involvement, a turnout that continues to fall. What are we going to see next year? How can we show all of us Europeans, and I might have an American accent, but my mother is French, so I have a French passport, and I speak 5 languages, European languages. What are we going to see when I go and vote next year? How many of my fellow Europeans are going to be voting? And if they don't, it's as we had during the Vietnam War. What if they had a war and nobody came? What if they had an election and nobody came? Almost nobody. What kind of existential situation would we be in? And this is why today we need to show how much people can get involved through the European Ombudsman, through the European Citizens Initiative, this new, thanks to the Lisbon Treaty, we have the power. And we have some people on this panel who can explain how they're doing this now. And we hope to prove the naysayers wrong, that yes, you can get involved on a grassroots level, either through that Citizens Initiative, through the European Ombudsman, or doing your own thing. And that's what we're going to be going to showing you today. Let's start with the panel. Starting on my right is Marc Bertrand. He is Ombudsman of Wallonia. And he'll have a lot of things to say, what sort of rockets he's been getting as an ombudsman. Next to him is Commissioner Viviane Reding, Commissioner for Justice, Fundamental Rights and Citizenship, Vice President of the European Commission. We have Nikiforos Diamandouros, who is the European Ombudsman. And to my left is, and this is a bit of a surprise, because we were expecting Martin Schulz, the President of the European Parliament. He has channeled himself to Isabelle Durand, who is Vice President of the European Parliament, because Mr. Schulz is busy reaching out, as he should, in Cyprus, which is having a lot of problems, as we know. And next to Isabelle Durand is Alessandra Mirabile, who is of Fraternité 2020. She is forging ahead with the European Citizens Initiative to try to gain more European funding for those young Europeans who want to go abroad and study with Erasmus programs and other. And next to her, finally, is Didier Caluwaerts, who is head of the G1000 Belgian citizens movement, and a movement that got started as a bunch of mad-as-hell citizens when their government couldn't form for more than a year. And we hope to hear some mad-as-hell from others, and we hope to hear those who have been able to make a mark. Let us begin with Mr. Diamandouros, the Ombudsman of the European Union. Mr. Diamandouros.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burns. Thank you all. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to you all for this interactive event entitled "It's Our Europe, Let's Get Active." I note that we're organizing this event in the framework of the European Year of Citizens 2013. Today's focus, therefore, is on citizens and their active participation in shaping Europe and its future. I'm very happy to welcome the representatives of several citizens' initiatives, grassroots movements, and complainants to the European Ombudsman, who are all contributing in different ways to changing the world in which we live. We very much look forward to hearing what they have to say and how they will engage with the topic of our event. I'm really sorry that unanticipated changes in President Schulz's agenda effectively prevent him from being with us today as scheduled. His presence in this event last year, along with those of President Barroso and the President of the Council of the EU, Mrs. Thorning-Schmidt, greatly added to the success of our efforts to involve citizens directly in a substantive dialogue with the institutions over ongoing developments profoundly affecting their lives and the future of the Union. On the other hand, we are delighted indeed that the Vice President of the European Parliament, Mrs. Isabelle Durand, has kindly agreed to join us today, thereby ensuring that the only democratically elected EU institution is represented at this European Ombudsman event at the top level. Mrs. Durand is well known for her very active engagement with civil society and as such is ideally suited for the task at hand. We are therefore grateful for her presence and very much look forward to hearing her views on citizens' participation in the European Union. A further expression of gratitude should also be extended to the European Parliament itself for once again generously allowing us to profit from its hospitality and to make use of this august building for our annual event, reaching out to as wide a range of European citizens as possible. In this connection, I wish to note that for the very first time, this event is being held not only here in Brussels, but also in almost every European Parliament information office throughout Europe. I would like, therefore, to welcome the citizens who have joined us in Bratislava and Berlin, in Prague and Paris, as well as in every other European capital. We look forward to receiving their contributions to our discussion via Twitter from every information office and from everyone else watching online. I am also particularly delighted that the Vice President of the European Commission, Madame Viviane Reding, is here with us today and is once again, as many times in the past, I want to thank her for that, honoring us with her participation in a major Ombudsman event. Mrs. Reding stands at the forefront of the Commission's dialogue with EU citizens, and she is particularly keen to emphasize her desire to reach out to citizens as individual citizens in addition to everything else. In recent months, she has traveled throughout the Union to meet with thousands of citizens and to listen to their concerns. Whether in Germany or in Greece, she really makes a point of talking with the citizens and not just about the citizens. For the second half of the event, we will welcome another Commission Vice President, Mr. Maroš Šefčovič. Mr. Šefčovič is, among other things, responsible for the European Citizens Initiative. I'm sure we will hear a lot about the ECIs today, and I look forward to hearing Mr. Šefčovič's insights on this new and important citizens' right. I would finally also welcome my colleague, Mr. Marc Bertrand, the Ombudsman of Wallonia and of the Wallonia-Brussels Federation, as well as Mr. Chris Burns from Euronews, whom I wish to thank formally for agreeing to act as the moderator of today's event. Thank you. Before we start, let me share some reflections with you. We're meeting here today against the backdrop of the worst crisis of the European Union in recent memory. The serious economic problems and challenges that my own country, as well as many other member states, have to cope with constitute an important dimension of this crisis. Every day, it seems, we receive more bad news, not only concerning the international financial markets, but also about growing social unrest linked to the austerity measures being implemented in a number of member states. As severe as the economic crisis is for the future of both the euro and the European Union itself, there nevertheless exists a second aspect of the crisis which deserves careful attention. Citizens all over the EU are losing trust in the ability not only of national governments, but also of the European Union to find solutions to current problems. I'm most concerned about this situation, especially given that part of my own mission is to enhance trust between European citizens and the EU administration. But it is one thing to sit and wait until the national governments or the EU institutions have reacted to these problems by taking certain initiatives, and quite another for citizens to act proactively and take positive measures themselves. The Lisbon Treaty provides for increased citizens' participation, for example, in the framework of the European Citizens' Initiative and the Commission's public consultations. These are indeed crucial steps forward on the long road to upholding and strengthening the right of citizens to participate in the democratic life of the European Union. I received many citizens' complaints about problems in these areas. I consider this to be a good sign, because such complaints allow me to discover potential deficiencies in the EU administration concerning instruments available to citizens for increased participation. They also help me in trying to rectify problems when they arise. Put otherwise, I'm happy to contribute to strengthening citizens' participation in the EU, and we will hear later how complaints to the Ombudsman can make a real difference. Today's event is about what citizens can do, partly at least, to take their fate into their own hands and to contribute to shaping the European Union and its future. There are many ways to do this, using EU instruments such as the European Citizens' Initiative, or alternatively, mobilizing large groups of citizens to carry out grassroots activities easily come to mind. In an attempt to approach the matter creatively, we will not only focus on the economic crisis and on ways to help solve it. We will also look at the important topic of how to build a clean and healthy Europe, an issue that concerns every European citizen. I very much look forward to participating in this groundbreaking, citizen-centered interactive debate and to drawing inspiration from comments and suggestions from all of you, whether here in Brussels or from the 30 capitals and cities throughout the EU that have joined us on this occasion. In doing so, we are also collectively demonstrating the concrete benefits for EU citizens deriving from the Treaty of Lisbon and from the multiple provisions for sustained consultation and dialogue between them and the EU institutions, and are making a modest but tangible contribution to the quality of democracy in the European legal order. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nikiforos. Let's go to another lightning rod. Nikiforos is a lightning rod as an ombudsman, and the European Parliament is as well, and will be facing elections next year. Isabelle Durand, what do you have to say about that as a lightning rod, just as Martin Schulz is as well?
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Ombudsman, ladies and gentlemen. And, well, hello to all of those who are following us from a distance and those who are following us in Nicosia, in Athens, Madrid, Lisbon. Maybe they aren't in the same state of mind as the people who are here. And I think that that's what has to shed light on our lantern in everything we do, not only in, well, the activities that we undertake between now and the next elections, but also for our Europe, which today is losing the confidence of the citizens of Europe. Perhaps not for the elderly, but the young people. Despite the fact that our ombudsman and a whole series of other stakeholders, whether it's in the Commission, whether it's in the Parliament, like we're doing today, are trying to show us how we can give keys to the citizens of Europe, we all know that confidence is suffering today, and that we have a tremendous responsibility, especially in the European Parliament, those of us who are elected representatives, but all of those who work for the elected representatives, or those who elect the elected representatives, because I think that in a year, the European Parliament could be the institution which, somewhere in the turnout and in the choice of the elected representatives, might pay a high price. The price of this crisis, this recession that a lot of citizens of Europe are suffering from. Now, this is only fair. Of course, people express themselves. They choose the representatives that they want to see here. And then there are all those who won't vote, who won't go out to vote. And there are those who will express their anger in their vote. Because there is a lot of anger in the European Union. And this vote of anger could go to parties that are defending a return to a national level, or at least they're trying to undermine the European Union and to show that at national level things will be better. So this is the context in which you are living, where we're living, and where today we have to try, as you said, to make citizens more active, to make them understand not only these keys that they have to their destiny, but the importance that they have in saying things and in being heard. And I think being heard is something where, in the role of the Ombudsman, or in the role of elected representative, or even in the role of a minister in a council or a European Commissioner, being heard is something extremely important. To be heard means, facing up to the consultations or participating in the consultations that are held across Europe. But it's even more interesting when we see what will be done with your opinions. And we know that there's often frustration because a consultation, an opinion that's been given by a group of citizens, an NGO, various stakeholders in Europe, well, perhaps gets lost in the shuffle. And that's why I think that the European Citizens Initiative is extremely important. It's too early to assess it. We'll see. Just a year ago, we had an initial debate in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, an open debate, because it's still impossible today to assess this initiative. I mean, there have been teething problems concerning the registration, the signatures, etc., and we're correcting all of this. The Commission has certainly undertaken to do this to try to improve the instrument, but at least we're going to see if for certain citizens' initiatives there's not only a request being made to the Commission, but a feedback concerning whether the citizens like the initiative, and if it's considered that there's no reason to support it, that should be explained publicly. And this is very important, at least as important as collecting signatures. That is to know what is being done with your project. And secondly, and here I'd like to pay tribute to the work of the Ombudsman, because a lot of things have taken place during the course of your mandate since you were elected the first time 10 years ago. It feels like yesterday, of course. But anyway, you played a role in the development of this function. That's very significant because the Union for itself and its member states has established a certain number of rules in terms of access to documents. That's extremely important because we didn't have that before. You've also explored the limits of these new rights, and you pleaded very convincingly to reform them and to make them more accessible. Now, the institutions have undertaken to legislate better. The Commission is carrying out broad consultations in this context to have an impact assessment and to propose new legislation. And you have also shored up the Code of Good Administrative Conduct, and that's very important, which was introduced by your predecessor. Now you went even further in establishing principles for a public service which have to guide the administration of the Union when it is in contact with the citizens of Europe. You've also emphasized the importance of the fact that good administration is not just limited to strict respect of rights, but there's a culture of service that we have to develop, a way, an approach to the citizens of Europe. The administration has to be at the service of the citizens and not the contrary, of course. Now, during the course of the year, you've also worked very effectively about being very diplomatic, of course, that's important, by endeavoring to combat poor administration everywhere you found it, but diplomatically, so that you never elicit conflict with administrations, and then your bureau has an influence which is, of course, proportional to your powers of persuasion, and I would like to pay tribute to that. And in this respect, it will be very difficult to follow in your footsteps, because there are so many complaints that require a response from the Ombudsman, but it's only possible to answer 18%. And the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which concerns a right concerning good administration, has also become legally binding since 2009, and at the same time, a new legal base, Article 298 of the Treaty for the adoption of legislative acts in order to better define these rights. The Parliament, based on your Council, has been endeavoring for 3 years to define the ways of applying this new law. There's a bilingual report which is being discussed, and I would urge the Commission to urgently take up their role in this process. And then I talked about the citizens' initiative, saying that it's the cornerstone in trying to improve participation of citizens. And these different examples do demonstrate that today it's clear that representative democracy, that of elected representatives, will never take place without a more participative democracy, whether it's in the forms I've just described, whether it's in new forms to be created. And I think that in this panel, especially in the Citizens' Initiative, but like in Belgium and elsewhere in Europe, they've set up processes which are more participative because they're deliberative among the citizens themselves. It's not just a relation between the citizen and the European administration or with the elected representative. It's something where the citizens amongst themselves discuss things, because deliberations among citizens is also a way of having you understand the complexity of a problem. And when we want to fight against populism, I think that the understanding of complexity is something that's extremely important. Demagogy is too easy. Oh, it's the fault of Europe, the fault of the other, fault of the Commission, fault of the Parliament. No. Problems are more complex than that, even more so in a world like the one we live in today. And I think that deliberations among citizens panels, all these ways of getting people to move to make them become experts themselves, citizens can become experts as much as you or me. These are instruments that we have to develop and that we can perfect. And then I'd like to turn to the Ombudsman, or the moderator, sorry. Mr. Burns, you're from Euronews, and Euronews is one of the exceptions in the media, a transnational exception. That is to say, you're working in several languages, you're providing European information, which is extremely difficult. Those who are listening to us today, those who are listening to us around the capitals of Europe, are used to turning to the media or to hearing from national media. And at European level, well, questions have to be dealt with in a transnational fashion. A national approach is not the best approach to understand European matters or European decision, legislation, proposals, resolutions. So I think this transnational work, and I know how difficult it is, whether it's for Euronews or for Arte, which started between France and Germany, whether it's for all types of, all aspects of the media, whether it's on television or whatever, the fact that we're going to have candidates to the European elections who will represent their political families. Well, I hope the media are going to organize real debates among the candidates. Real debates, political debates like we have in a national debate among representatives of different groups. So will this be someone where, well, the French citizen sees a Czech or a Finn on TV? Well, that'd be really good. And because there have to be subtitles or simultaneous interpretation, it'd be nice for the French citizen to listen to a German, a Finn, or Czech. It's very important to hear Europe through the mouth of somebody who isn't through your own culture, but lives in a different context at the same time as being just as European as you. This is extremely important, and above all, I think that this can break this vicious circle of saying, oh, that's the fault of Europe. No, that's enough. European decisions are based not only by the elected representative of the European Parliament or on the proposals of the Commission. It's based on the ministers, the prime ministers, the heads of state, the national parliaments. Who talks about Europe in the national parliaments? Do you ask your national MPs about European matters and what they do at European level? I mean, your minister is a co-decider. He has to be accountable. And, of course, he has to talk about national and regional things, too. And then, of course, he'll get his little article in the local newspaper to say that he raised a question in the European Parliament which concerns you immediately. But he doesn't ask his own minister what he's doing in the European Council on transport, energy, Economic Affairs or whatever council that's deciding on things which are very important in terms of European legislation for 450 million people. So we just have to change our approach, our attitude. And I hope that the contribution of the Ombudsman and this annual event, like today, in the presence of all the people here and who are listening to us from a distance, will awaken citizens' energy and will break this too facile image of a Europe which is too cold, arrogant, technocratic. Sometimes it's true, but it's certainly not always true. And there are times that come where you have to take opportunities to get your voice heard, and I hope that'll be the case today. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mrs. Durand, for that statement. You're right that there's a trouble with confidence in Europe, and this anger has to be returned to the grassroots and not to be converted into populism. And we'll see that next year. Commissioner Viviane Reding.
Citizenship, Commissioner, I think you have your ear perhaps closest to the ground among the citizens of Europe this year, the Year of the Citizen. What do you hear?
Good morning to all of you, those in this room and those who listen to us outside. I would like first to congratulate Nikiforos Diamandouros, because not only he has organized this meeting, and it is one of the first digital debates which we have, an interesting way to reach out, but also because of the title of the event. It is Our Europe, Let's Get Active. And active citizenship, people who take over, people who raise their voice, people who take an initiative. That is exactly what we need during this European Year of Citizenship. Now, you know that citizenship is turning 20 years old, and if I ask citizens in Europe, 2/3 of them feel Europeans, but only 1/3 of them knows what that means. And I believe that if you would question the 1/3, 10% of those really would know what being a European citizen means. And that is because we managed to create at Maastricht a monetary union, but we only put the citizenship on paper. And here we really need to go a step forward. Now, according to the treaties, the right to complain is an important element, and that is why the Ombudsman is so important. And the Ombudsman is not alone, because he is also working together with the Petition Committee in this House, a very long existing, extraordinary important element. And the Petition Committee is working together with the national ombudsman. So it is a circle of people who are at the disposal of the citizens, and it is a very important one. Now, the citizens also have the right to write to any institution and to get a reply on this. I myself receive roughly 5,000 letters per year, so you can imagine that the replies given to these letters are an important element of the work of my DG and my collaborators. The problem with these letters is that more than half are not addressed actually to the European institutions. They are addressed to the national level, and they are completely in despair because they didn't get a response at the national level. So Europe is seen somehow as a last resort, very often for problems which could not be solved at the level they should have been solved. And that brings me then to the European Year of Citizens. Why did we want to do this year? Well, for the simple reason, and there again I give you a fact and a figure, for the simple reason that only 1/3 of our citizens believe that their voice counts. And that leaves me then, of course, to the question that Madame Durand has underlined, because people do not feel that they have a say, that when they have a say, this say has an impact, well, then they won't say anything. They won't say it during the year, and they wouldn't say it during the elections, even not going to vote. Very interesting, 21% of people only turned up in the elections for the European Parliament in Croatia. And in order to close this gap, in order to show to the people, yes, your voice counts, you cannot do it by long speeches, because people are fed up with long speeches. You can only do it in the way that you can only do what politicians don't know to do, to shut up and to listen, and to give an answer. And that was the idea with the citizens' dialogues. We have done citizens' dialogues all over the place so far, and I have started very consciously to make them in places where things are going wrong. The first one was in the south of Spain. I was in Greece, I was in Portugal, I was in Ireland, and so on and so forth. 300, 400, 500 citizens sitting around, and during 2 hours, no speech, question, answer, question, answer. Now, what is the result of this? First, citizens are puzzled. It's the first time a politician comes to us and listens to us. They are not used to that at all. Second thing, I was prepared to hear, well, Europe is doing bad, Europe should be out, and Europe here or there. No, the contrary. You know that they want more Europe. And actually they are not caring about what institution is solving the problem, just solve the problem. So the whole institutional debates, which we think are important, for the citizens they are not. I remember in Berlin, I had been prepared to speak about cornichons and other light bulbs to defend myself that Europe shouldn't mix into this and shouldn't mix into that. I give you an example. There was a lady who had a problem with her kid at school. And she says, you, Madam Commissioner, know to solve problems, so please solve the problem. I was explaining to the woman that the European treaties foresee that school programs is subsidiarity, and that in order to change that we should need to change the treaty. Well, you know what the answer was? Well, change the treaty and solve my problem. A good lesson. A good lesson. That means all the complexity of the way we function, citizens don't care. Citizens just would like to have a simple question, a simple answer, and a little action. Do it. That was also the reason why we started the preparation of the citizens' dialogue in May last year with the first ever citizens' interaction on the internet. We received at that moment 12,000 contributions, all contributions who wanted more Europe, more integration, and more direct action, less red tape. So, the citizens' report, which I presented afterwards, were about a to-do list. This is what we are going to do. And I tell you that on the 25 elements which I proposed 2 years ago, well, 24 have been put into practice. And then the next one is going to be, the next report is going to come out in May this year. And it will very well take into consideration what the citizens told to us, not only in the dialogues, but also in these 5,000 letters they send to me per year, and also in these 1 million questions they ask Europe Direct per year. So we get a feeling what is on the agenda for the citizens, to get rid of red tape, to make it easier to have free movement, for instance. Those are very high on the agenda. So, again, in this year I will come with 12 concrete proposals, and we will put those 12 concrete proposals into practice in order to say, yes, you citizens, you have a say. And yes, your voice is heard, because the input we have received from you is going to a very concrete, not blah blah, but very concrete problem solution. And I believe that this is very important, that politicians show that they listen to citizens, that they also explain why we can do things and why we can't do other things, and explain what is the level where a solution can be given. Sometimes the level is a regional level or a local level even. It mustn't be the European level. So I do see this European Year of Citizens not as a laboratory experiment, but as a political necessity and as a historical responsibility. All commissioners go out. We do that together with members of parliament. We do it together with national ministers. We do it together with mayors. And I think we change the way politics are done. I hope it will have an effect during the election campaign so that the interaction can be greater. And I hope it will have an effect on something else, on the preparation of the next treaties, to give the solutions to all the problems we have seen now, but not to do it anymore as we were used to do it, how we were used to do the treaties. Some wise men and women were sitting together, were finding solutions, and in the end, these solutions were given out to the citizens, take it or leave it. No, this time we should get the citizens into this dialogue for changing the treaties from the moment on that we think about what we should do until the moment we have solutions on the table, so that citizens accompany this changing of treaty, and when they have to vote in a referendum, for instance, that they know about what they vote, because their voice is into that. So that is what I try to do during this year. Thank you for helping.
Commissioner Reding, thank you very much. Very interesting to hear. And also to know that you were in the European Parliament. You were president of the Petitions Committee, so you were very much in touch with that during that period from 1989 to 92. That was a very key period, testing the Maastricht Treaty, which almost didn't pass. So let's move on to someone who is forging ahead with one of these European Citizens' Initiatives, a petition to try to get the European Union to spend more money on Erasmus-like programs as an investment in the future for our youth. Let's go to Alessandra Mirabile, and she can explain to you how this has worked for her group. It's not easy, as we've said already. It still has a bit of kinks in the machinery that have to be worked out, and so this is a bit of almost a test and experiment with this European Citizens Initiative. I try to avoid the alphabet-souped ECI, but perhaps we might refer to it that way. And in the meantime, before we do that, and we're starting with our panel now, Gundi Gottesman is busy here. I'm going to be watching her body talk to see when we've got some good tweets as questions. We're going to go to the questions as soon as we can, so all of those out there who are watching in those 30 cities across Europe, as well as the audience and those people who are online watching this streaming on the EU Ombudsman website. If you have a question or a comment to send, and they're piling in, I'm seeing this tweet wall, it's busy furiously adding more tweets. The tweet hashtag is hashtag EYC 2013EO. So please send as many tweets as you can. Let's get this debate going, and let's go to Alessandra.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Dear European Ombudsman, Mr. Nikiforos Diamandouros, many thanks for the invitation. I feel extremely privileged today to address this highly distinguished audience. So during my presentation, it will be very short, so to give you the opportunity to interact and to ask as many questions as you want. I'd like to share with you the reasons why I believe that the ECI Fraternité 2020 and more generally the rationale behind it could form part of the solution to the current economic crisis, since the name of the panel is Help Solve the Economic Crisis. It is really high-sounding. It sounds a little bit scary, I would say. So my contribution is meant, anyway, to be a really modest contribution to the huge and acrimonious debate revolving around the global economic downturn and all the issues related to that. So in concrete terms, what we are striving for in our campaign, we are striving for more funds, namely 3% of the EU budget being allocated to EU exchange programs. Now, regardless of the institutional tough battles characterizing the ongoing multi-annual financial framework with debate, which I won't deal with now, we strongly believe, so the Citizens Committee for Fraternité 2020 strongly believes that more EU citizens should be given the chance to go abroad to experience what Europe means for them, and therefore to take advantage of the mobility programs the EU offers. And more generally, the EU should shift its integration efforts towards the level of individual European citizens, and since 2013 is the year for the European citizens, we should start acting accordingly, and this also, of course, implies an active engagement and involvement of the citizens. More mobility, of course, would also elicit positive effects in economic terms as well, as these would boost economic growth and bring down the unemployment rates across Europe, above all the youth unemployment rate, which is a major concern nowadays, as we all know. And in this regard, I'd like to emphasize what Professor Sofia Corradi, also known as Mama Erasmus, said during the press conference we held on the 10th of April 2013, which was also attended by Mrs. Isabelle Durand. Thanks a lot again for participating and giving your contribution to that. So when talking about the benefits linked to the participation in EU exchange programs, she argued in a very passionate and convincing way that EU mobility programs more generally, and Erasmus more specifically, represent not only a way to experience Europe's cultural diversity, but also a gateway to the labour market. Therefore, exchange programs constitute an important added value in the CVs of young people, in their endeavour to find a proper job, rather than unpaid traineeships or poorly paid traineeships. And I'm sure that here the young participants in the audience, me included, are well aware of this phenomenon. And according to my personal experience, since I've been living abroad for many years now, I'd like to add that living abroad is an experience, is an eye-opening experience, is something which helps to forge your personality, your perceptions of life, and it enables you to behave and act as a free individual, I would say, something which is not always that taken for granted even in free, democratic and liberal societies as ours. So I believe that when talking about Erasmus programs, EU exchange programs, we should adopt a more holistic approach rather than thinking about them as EU-funded holidays in Spain or possibly in Cyprus or Malta, or even in Belgium for those keen on beer and chocolate. Yeah? Well, on a more serious note, I'd like to emphasize, of course, that although we don't see each other or we don't see ourselves as naive European militants, we have put great effort into our campaign, into Fraternité 2020, driven by the desire to change the future of Europe and make it a better place to live. We are aware that we are living in a time of a profound crisis, which is not only a mere economic and financial crisis, but also a crisis of democracy, a crisis of trust in governance and institutions, as Mrs. Isabelle Durand and Mr. Diamandouros already emphasized. But in this time of crisis, we should also not forget the windows of opportunity which we have. In this time of crisis, it's of paramount importance that investments on young Europeans, on the human capital Europe has at its disposal, should be high in the agenda. So not only investments on agriculture, on structural funds, on cohesion funds, which of course are equally important, but also investments in future-oriented activities like education and mobility, of course. Yeah. So given today's economic challenges, if we want to achieve smart, sustainable and inclusive growth, which is the fil rouge underlying the EU Commission agenda, we cannot afford to sacrifice future-oriented investments. If we don't do that, if we will fail, and so will the EU project sooner or later. So a genuine EU success story can be built up, from my point of view, not only by fostering joint European economic governance and a fiscal union, but also by putting the concept of EU citizenship into practice, not only leaving it on paper, and fostering more mobility, improving the quality and quantity of EU exchange programs could and should be part of that, so that young Europeans, young citizens, have the chance to gain awareness of what Europe concretely means for them. Of course, in order to achieve this, we should engage further, we should gather more support, and we should work hard to generate a more receptive environment for participatory democracy, and to ensure that the European Citizens' Initiative, as the first tool of transnational participatory democracy, will be a success eventually. So to conclude, of course, I strongly encourage you to endorse this prime example of participatory democracy, and last but not least, to go online and sign our initiative, Fraternité 2020. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you in a discussion.
Alessandra, thank you very much. I see how you're trying to fill that, what some people call a democratic deficit, and I think there are many ways that we can do that, and that's what we'll be discussing today, through petitions, through grassroots, and through the Ombudsman. And we have another Ombudsman here on the panel, Marc Bertrand, who serves as a lightning rod for Wallonia. I'm sure you have myriad stories.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ombudsman, Madam Vice President of the European Parliament, Madam Vice President of the European Commission, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I understand we're reaching outside this building. We've got viewers online. I'd like to welcome you too. So, I was asked to take the floor for this panel this morning, and to give you a general idea of the situation that European citizens find themselves in at the moment and the way that they can contribute to the European project. More specifically, in this panel, I was asked to look at how we can contribute towards helping to solve the economic crisis. And so here I'm going to share my experience with you as the Ombudsman here in Wallonia and Belgium. Now, I'm not going to try to give you a structural response on how to resolve the European crisis right now, but nonetheless, I think what I will show is that we can contribute to helping those people who are directly affected by the crisis. Safeguarding and promoting human rights truly is a labour of Sisyphus, always restarting and never completed. Although we can sometimes give in to the illusion that significant progress has been made, time dispels that myth and very quickly jolts us back into the real world, and the work must be started again. Those words were spoken in 1996 in Strasbourg by the President of the Governmental Committee for the Social Charter, and these words are still true today. The decree which created the Ombudsman of Wallonia and of the Wallonia-Brussels Federation did not explicitly provide the Ombudsman with the main task of protecting individual rights. Nonetheless, by the action that it carries out, the Ombudsman has contributed to this. Our role is to control the work that's done by the administration and how it interacts with citizens, to ensure that it can work correctly, to ensure that we can bring the administration and citizens together, and to contribute to restoring the citizens' confidence in their administration and their government. Now, the activities that we carry out look at the daily interaction that citizens have with administration, the requirements that might be considered to be quite restrictive that we have at the moment. As was recently covered in an interview, Mr. Baudis, the French defender of rights, stated that all claims must be treated in the same way. Our mission is to ensure that there is an access to their rights for all of those people who need them, and we need to ensure that we can have a good relationship between citizens and their government. We have to ensure that we can do our very best for the people who come to us. And we have to look at how we can improve the work we do if we've seen something that doesn't work ourselves. Now, while we do defend citizens against perhaps the administration not always working as it should, we also contribute to safeguarding fundamental rights and economic and social rights of citizens. And it is this dimension which is covered in the title of Ombudsman in many different countries. We've got the Defender of Rights in France, we've got the Protector of Citizens in Quebec, the Defender of the People in Spain. These developments, I think, can be shown in the following way. In Belgium, one of the articles of our constitution states that everyone has got the right to human dignity. We've also got economic, social, and cultural rights. These rights cover the right to work and to be able to freely choose your professional activity, ensuring as good an employment opportunity for you, ensuring that you are well paid or sufficiently paid. The right to social security, to protection of your health, social security, medical and legal protection, the right to decent accommodation, the right to protection of healthy environment. Now, these rights do require an additional action to be taken by legislative powers. In my country, the various different levels of power mean that these standards have to be kept, and we have to ensure the citizens' rights. Here, if public organisations and the administration in its relations with normal people, with citizens, don't fulfil their tasks fully, then that is where the Ombudsman can step in. Now, if we look at citizens' rights relating to accommodation, environment, health, and to thrive culturally as well, there, if these rights are not met, then the Ombudsman can ensure that he can protect and safeguard these rights.
Please bear with us. Please bear with us. Hopefully this is just a false alarm. And those of you out there in 30 cities, we have a fire alarm here, and we hope that this will resolve itself in the next few moments, but please stand by. There we go. Okay.
Thank you. It's very efficient.
That's right. The Ombudsman was very efficient. That's right. No, we didn't stage this.
Merci.
Thank you. Well, I just want to finish by saying that the Ombudsman does contribute to the protection and safeguarding of these rights. This is all the more true when the Ombudsman is called upon by a specific category of citizens, those citizens who are most vulnerable, those citizens who find themselves feeling the effects of the crisis.
Please stand by. Here we go. All right.
J'espère que... Donc, dans notre...
So, in our society, there is particular attention paid to a specific category of people, those excluded from society, excluded from work or from accommodation or from healthcare. Those people who struggle to pay the bills every month. Those people who are incapable of paying school fees, for example. The right to work, health protection and accommodation, these are fundamental rights.
Bien compliqué.
Please stand by once again. Okay.
Okay. For 1 minute or 2 maximum. Je voudrais à nouveau citer...
So once again, I'll quote Mr. Baudu. The current crisis causes tensions. It exacerbates relations and conflicts and makes it all the more difficult for those people that are in a precarious situation. However, it's not just a lack of resources that is the problem here. We have to look at the vulnerability of our citizens and recognize that our society can sometimes be brutal. A blind application of rules, lack of dialogue, lack of transparency and complexity in administrations or private organizations lead to people feeling, rightly or wrongly, that there is indifference or injustice from the government. It is through grassroots action that the Ombudsman is trying now to look at people's real problems to ensure that we can have a direct link with administration and in this way fight against all forms of exclusion. The Ombudsman has to be involved in ensuring that we protect the most vulnerable members of our society. The Ombudsman listens to citizens. This is very important, and that was said before. The Ombudsman is the spokesperson of the citizens, and he tries to go further than just the individual cases, making recommendations to the administration and forms. In addition to these conciliation activities and looking at injustices and the way that administration doesn't work properly, the Ombudsman also contributes to social peace and ensures that there is effective protection of human rights and these fundamental rights. Jacques Pelletier, who is the Ombudsman in France, said that mediation and exclusion are intimately linked. The president of the Parliament for the Wallonia-Brussels Federation recently spoke and said that we're going through an unprecedented economic and social crisis. Europe is gripped with doubts, and this is true of the population as well. In this very difficult situation, the Ombudsman can protect democracy by helping governments to maintain the confidence of their citizens, to fulfill its role as a conciliation body. We shouldn't send the citizens to sleep, and that's not what we're trying to do here. Instead, we're trying to ensure that we can have active participation to improve good governance. This means ensuring that we are checking administration and ensuring that people's complaints can be heard and the rules can be improved. It is this idea of the role of the Ombudsman that has been supported by many parliamentary ombudsmen. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to give you a general idea today that what the Ombudsman does on a daily basis helps us to ensure that we can improve fundamental rights. If Sisyphus were one day to reach the top of the mountain, then I wonder then what Ms. Leiter would think of that. Today, in these these times of serious crisis, we cannot ignore issues relating to poverty and exclusion. Thank you.
Bertrand, merci beaucoup. Encore. We're told there is a bug in the system, the ghost in the machine we're trying to resolve. If you please bear with us and perhaps that could be the last. We hope. We are quickly running out of time in this first panel. So if we could quickly then go to Didier Caluwaerts of the G1000 Belgian Citizens Movement, and then we'll go to your questions as quickly as we can. Didier, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the Office of the European Ombudsman for organizing this wonderful event. I would also like to thank everyone here present today for a short presentation on the G1000. Apparently we have some intruders. The G1000 was a citizens' initiative that took place a little over a year ago in Belgium, right here in Brussels actually. And just like many of the other events and initiatives that we're hearing about today, the G1000 shows actually the extraordinary commitment of ordinary citizens to their democracy. And what we did was really quite amazing, actually. We gathered 704 randomly chosen Belgian citizens from both language groups, actually the three language groups, and we had them discuss important social, economic, and political issues. And these are the citizens that are often considered to be politically disinterested, politically apathetic, and politically distrusting. But what we saw is that these citizens are also willing and very eager to accept our invitation to spend one entire day, which was a holiday, and to contribute to the public cause by discussing these public issues. And the G1000 succeeded in something that was believed to be impossible in Belgium, and here are some of the figures. We put a very long manifesto online, and in 10 days' time, 10,000 people signed the manifesto. They read the manifesto and they signed it. In 3 months' time, we went from a group of 7 volunteers or 7 organizers meeting just around a kitchen table to a massive citizens organization.
DJ, I'm so sorry I have to interrupt you. We do have to evacuate the building. Those listening in on streaming, we will be back as soon as we can, but we must evacuate. I'm very sorry.
Please take your seats again. The technical bug has been found.
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry about this chamboulement. And if you could please take your seats as quickly as possible. As you're taking your seats, I think we're going to get Didier going so we can get to the questions quickly. We have a lot of tweets, we have a lot of questions and comments, and that's what we're here for especially. Didier, go ahead.
Okay, take two. So like I said, the G1000 was a big citizens movement. We gathered 10,000 supporters, 800 full-time volunteers, and in 6 months' time we gathered 500,000 euros through crowdfunding. So ordinary citizens paid for our project. And to put all of these things into perspective, the G1000 took place under the worst of circumstances because for 500 days, for over a year and a half, we didn't have a government in Belgium. Because the political parties, basically, they couldn't decide their political differences and they couldn't work towards a common goal. But what the G1000 has shown, and there was just one day in November, is that even the deepest of conflicts and the deepest of disagreements can be overcome. It showed the resilience of democracy. It showed that citizens can look beyond their own viewpoints, and it showed that citizens can find solutions even when the conflicts are actually very deep. And it might be good to highlight at this point some of the examples of the radical thinking that these citizens did. And first of all, they proposed to impose a tax on financial transactions, such as a Tobin tax. They proposed to reduce poverty and inequality by creating a universal basic income, and we have found a flyer here on the basic income, the ECI. And they propose to invest more in innovation and to create a knowledge economy that faces the future economic challenges. And these are just some of the recommendations they did. More of these can be found on our website. We have a final report in which you can find all of the recommendations. So basically, to finish up, I would like to mention that the G1000 process has not only had a Belgian impact, but also had an international echo. In the Netherlands, there was a citizens forum on urban renewal that took the G1000 as a model. In Greece and Spain and Portugal, citizens initiatives like the G1000 are put up to assess the impact of the financial crisis on people's lives, on society. And in many Belgian cities, the G1000 stands as a model for participatory and deliberative democracy. It is therefore no exaggeration to say that citizen democracy is alive and kicking, and the European Year of Citizens could not come at a better moment. And I join my colleagues here today in asking the European Union and the European those holding European responsibility to listen and to thoroughly listen to citizens and to innovate the Union, the European Union, from the bottom up. Thank you.
DJ, thank you, of G1000. Thank you very much. Let's go quickly to the questions. We have, en principe, 11 minutes left, but maybe we can go a few minutes into overtime on this part of the debate, Help Solve the Crisis. Gundi Gadisman of the European Ombudsman, You've been watching closely all the tweets, and if there are comments, of course, coming from some of the 30 cities across Europe that are connected with this event in the European Parliament offices across Europe, let us know. Tell us what you hear right now.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of participation from the European Parliament offices in the member states, so that's really great. We're getting massive comments and questions. Just to give you some maybe more general questions also for Madame Durand and other speakers. For example, the Portuguese European Parliament office is asking, anti-Europe parties are achieving relevant results. Will this crisis irremediably kill a European citizenship? One of the crucial questions. And also, what are the legal instruments to help citizens understand if an issue is of national or EU competence? We talked of both competences here. That's a question from the EP office in Latvia. There are quite a lot of questions also to the European Ombudsman. For example, from the EP office in Prague, what can the Ombudsman do to concretely to shape the European Union? The European Parliament office in the Netherlands would like to know what's the difference? What can you do what the Dutch Ombudsman cannot do? How do we understand the difference here? The Spanish European Parliament office would like to know what role you are actually playing in the European Citizens Initiative, which has been mentioned. And then there's also some interest because of a new ombudsman being elected in the next months, and they would like to know what you would think would be a good profile for this new ombudsman. Madame Reding has left now, but that's a pity because there are some interesting questions for her as well, but maybe the others can address it. For example, Citizens E is asking, citizens say they do not have any impact. Do you think that's true, or is it just lack of information? What do you do about it? I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Okay, Gundi, thank you very much. And I'd also like to, at the same time, to throw it out to the audience. Do we have a question that we can go to right away? We have many. But let's start with this gentleman here.
Buongiorno a tutti. Good morning, everybody. I'm Italian. I'm Mario Accardi, and I was, about 10 years ago, an ombudsman in my local authority in Sicily, Campobello d'Anzano, which is in the province of Trapani. I'd like to thank the ombudsman for the invitation, and it gives me an opportunity to continue to act to defend civic rights. Now, the Ombudsman was well aware of all this. He came to Palermo in 2008, and I made a public statement to this effect. Sadly, in Sicily and in Italy, civic defence, ombudsmanship is all but dead. And the scope for citizens to have support, to have someone to take them by the hand and be a mouthpiece, that's all gone. So it's not just an ombudsman here. I mean, I know the activity that you've been engaged in. I'd like to turn to Mrs. Durand and say, what has the European Parliament done? What are you hoping to do in the near future? I hope you are re-elected. What are you going to do to avoid a situation where citizens lose confidence? And the key reason for this, the key responsibility lies with politicians. Politicians have eliminated people who can stand up for people. Because politicians should have given them a service, should have given them some help. But what you end up is that people in office are desperate to get elected again.
Another question over here, Madame, way back here.
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, I'm Stella Veliki. I'm a physicist, an IT specialist, and above all, a European citizen. I would like to echo the congratulations to the top table and to the European Ombudsman Service. Ever since I've known the service, it's been a hallmark for effectiveness and swift response. It's the only European institution that has direct contact with citizens, to my mind. So my question now, how are you going to urge Cypriots, Greeks and Spaniards to vote at the European elections, explaining the errors made by the Troika first and foremost, who proposed the Troika, the errors made by the whole Troika approach? And I think that might give you a slim chance of getting a decent turnout. Then finally, in the midst of a crisis, why doesn't the European Treaty provide for other economic values, and why not? Is there anything that European citizens can do to alter this?
One more question, if we could have Mr. Pierce. Mr. Pierce, please.
David Price.
Mr. Price, thank you.
David Price. I'm a journalist. I write Your Democracy and edit the Schumann.info site on the origin, purpose and future of the community. My question would have been from Mrs. Redding, which is about, I mean, a lot of citizens were shocked that the Commission is actually suggesting that one of the major citizens' rights to participate in democracies is being withdrawn. That is that the right of all citizens to be considered a candidate for the European Commission. And that's been the case right since the beginning. When Jean Monnet was the first president, he wasn't a politician. Neither were a lot of the other members of the Commission.
But we're talking about the economic crisis right now, actually, Mr. Price.
Okay, I thought we were talking about citizens' rights. Sorry.
Do you have a question regarding that, regarding the economic crisis?
Well, the economic crisis parallels the takeover of the institutions by the politicians, the first question was saying. So how do people on the panel suggest that the rights of citizens to be considered candidates for the Commission can be reinstated? So you have lawyers like Hallstein, you have civil servants, diplomats and others, NGOs can be considered members of the Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Price. We're running out of time on this panel, but let's go to Madame Durand, who cannot stay with us through the next panel. Madame Durand.
Merci.
Thank you. Well, I'll endeavour to give some form of response to the questions and comments that have been put both from outside the room and here within. So, what can we do to avoid a development of the anti-European sentiment and kill off any notion of Europe? A bit similar to the questions that the lady was raising about trust in the Troika. Well, one day the Troika is going to have to be accountable. It's going to have to explain what's happened. It's going to have to, I think, acknowledge its mistakes. And I think those standing for election, not necessarily those standing for election as the Commission President, because that's not a directly elected post, but those standing for election need to own up to the mistakes that have been made, or at least elements that have not exactly helped the economic situation in which many people, especially in the south of Europe, find themselves. I'm with you, Madam. I worry not just about the turnout, but who people are actually going to vote for in the European elections. People feel abandoned, rightly or wrongly. I mean, I think there is shared responsibility there. But Europe is seen as responsible for the decisions that have been taken. Europe, generally. No one knows quite what's meant by Europe, but Europe in general terms. Europe needs to explain things. And I think that's a bit different. You're sort of on top and you're saying, I'm right and I'm going to explain my rationale. I think we need to start off by listening. We need to take a bit of the tension out of the situation, reduce anger. Now, I think it's important. I think if you don't admit to mistakes, no one's going to listen to what you say. I think the mistakes are very real. And I think we also need to say that things are not desperately straightforward. Public deficits do need to be combated. Otherwise, we have no more public policy. But the way in which we've gone about things was not necessarily right. So start off by listening. Secondly, give people an opportunity to vent their anger, recognise their mistakes, and fourthly, say that there are other values, not just the economy. We are so blinkered and are focused on the economic factors, and it's true that it's changing things for so many people out there, especially young people. Well, there was a question from the Portuguese Parliament office. Do you believe that this crisis could kill off European citizenship?
Sure.
Well, I think it could kill off a whole lot of things, not necessarily the whole of European citizenship. It's a killer of confidence. What is European citizenship? There's a legal aspect, the right to vote, European rights, and then there's the European sentiment. Well, I think at the moment it's in a pretty parlous state because of the crisis. Europe isn't responsible for everything, but it's seen as being responsible for everything. And indeed, for some people, European project, Europe itself should be called into question. The far right, those on the extreme right and sometimes on the extreme left, those who are attached to sovereignty are calling for a return to national policies. They're saying that this whole project of organised things together hasn't worked. Now, at the levels, in terms of levels, we talked about where the powers lie. We are using a multi-layer governance structure. People need to have confidence. Now, they need to understand that the different levels are speaking to each other, that they're joined up, that they're coordinating responses between the local, regional, national and European levels. They don't get that sense because everybody seems to be throwing the ball into everybody else's court. It's not me, it's someone else. Wow. Well, Alessandra, I don't know, perhaps you could give a
relationship between the Ombudsman and these European Citizens Initiative. Let me hear it from you. How did you mobilize to get this European Citizens Initiative? Did you work with the Ombudsman in that regard?
Well, in concrete terms, we didn't work with the Ombudsman to mobilize people and to gain their awareness or to let them know that our campaign exists, not with the Ombudsman directly, but we worked and we have been working very much with the European Parliament since we have been gaining the support of roughly 50 members of the European Parliament. We have been working to some extent also with the European Commission, and in order, of course, to let people know that we exist, we also worked a lot on the social media level. So we worked a lot on Facebook, Twitter, so all the social media aspects of the campaign, which of course it's not enough because to work only on that level, but we also work at the personal level. For instance, I put or attach great importance to the personal interaction with people, so to make them aware of the whole process. And regarding what Mrs. Goodman said, so concerning the question that citizens have no impact, is it maybe due to a lack of information? For sure, this is a lack of information as well. It's not only a responsibility of the institutions, I mean, the responsibility is always shared. So it's also true that citizens should engage more and should be more active and more proactive in collecting the information they want and in gaining awareness of what their rights and what their possibilities are to influence the EU legislation, or at least to have a say on that.
Maybe quickly from Didier, some of these questions relate to where does the Ombudsman come in? Where does the ECI, the petition movement, come in? Where do the grassroots come in? Why did you choose grassroots as opposed to the other ways among these mad-as-hell citizens when the government wasn't coming together?
Well, much like the European Union, the Belgian political system is very much elitist, and to a certain extent, we thought that a grassroots incentive might be the kind of the incentive to deblock the system and to break through the deadlock. But I'm a bit more positive about the potential impact of crises on citizens, more positive than Madame Durand, en fait. The reason is that in a lot of countries, I think about Ireland, Ireland has known a very large financial and economic crisis in recent years, and it is now, it's now organizing a constitutional convention in which ordinary citizens and politicians are sitting together to work on very specific issues that will eventually be put to a referendum. Iceland, the same thing, a very strong political and economic and financial crisis. Also, we see that the Citizens Forum is being organized to kind of de-block the system, to make the system more legitimate. In Belgium also, we had a deep political crisis, and we can see that actually these crises are kind of an incentive for deliberation, a kind of an incentive for citizens to stand up and to take control, and to show politicians that, that differences are not, that differences can be overcome, even if there is no political willingness. So the reason why we chose to do it on a very grassroots basis is just to show that we are not dependent on politicians, that we are not dependent on political parties and so on. We are not dependent on public financing. We could do it ourselves, and we showed that citizens can be motivated to participate, even if there's no formal structure.
Okay, Didier, thank you very much. Yes?
Je voudrais juste ajouter, je suis...
Well, I agree. Sometimes the crisis requires citizens to go out there and look for alternative solutions, but I'm at a different stage, if you like. At some point, the process has to be handed back to politicians. In other words, it goes back and forth between stakeholder participation and political decision-making. Now, I'm not negative. On the contrary, I'm very enthusiastic and very much behind this campaign, which is about to get underway. But I think the dynamism, the engagement should be such that at the end of the day, you hand it back to politicians. Otherwise, the citizens' initiatives will disappoint. If you look, for example, at Ireland, this should give rise to a new constitution, and you should have political players who are moulded by the constitution. And so there has to be interaction, which can be problematic. And the political class in Belgium has not always taken on this campaign with a great deal of enthusiasm. It's been regarded as just hot air and not desperately important. Said that they've now formed a government, although this wasn't directly linked, of course, to the makeup of the government.
Excusez-moi, avant que Madame
Sorry. Before Mrs. Durand leaves, I just wanted to add something. We took up the G1000. Could you just give us your name? I'm Marie Christina. I represent Belgium in the European Citizens Initiative for unconditional basic income. Mrs. Durand, citizens and politicians do need to be in touch. I feel this. I use an instrument that Europe has given us, the European Citizens Initiative. But at my level, I'm just a mere citizen. It's very difficult to get in contact with politicians who around me. They simply close their doors. They've got more interesting business to be getting on with. And so it's really a fight in the trenches here for those who are supporting the initiatives, with just a grain of hope. And I'm sure Mrs. Durand will listen to us. But the grain of hope is that ultimately politicians will actually listen, will see that citizens have launched this initiative and that they have to listen, because that has to be the building block for Europe too. Isabelle, do you agree? Well, yes, I do. Now, good luck to you for your initiative. But I can see Margaret Blanco, who's from the Petitions Committee, in the room. Now, when the Citizens' Initiative gets to the European Commission, if the Commission says no, and it's his right to do so, there has to be a proper debate. What you've done needs to come back, and you may not have got it through the front door, but you get it through the back door of the European Parliament, so that we can continue to follow it up and see what happens to the initiative. It's critical to follow up on the work of citizens, so that it doesn't simply end up in a waste paper bin in the Commission somewhere. We need to have a debate. Well, the doors are open. We just have to nudge a bit harder. Quite hard. Okay, we're now going to change the panel. Thank you very much to the panelists, Alessandra Mirabile, Marc, Bertrand, and Didier Caluwaerts.
For being with us, and I think, Isabelle, you have to run as well. So please give a hand to this first panel. And in the meantime, we're going to bring up our second panel.
Nice
to see you, Commissioner. Yes. Which includes Commissioner Šefčovič, who is Vice President of the European Commission and in charge of interinstitutional relations and administration. As we have our hellos and goodbyes, Mr. Šefčovič will give us a brief commentary. We are not taking a break, unfortunately. We had enough fire drills to break things up. And as the time is ticking, we will proceed directly with the Commissioner's comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Burns, dear Ombudsman.
Thank you.
Dear Nikiforos, dear members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. First, I really would like to thank our European Ombudsman for proposing and also sort of hosting this event today. And I also would like to thank him for his effort, his personal effort, but also effort of his office to really show how the Ombudsman Office can reach out to the citizens and can really make sure that the citizens feel that they have the address if they feel that they have a complaint to make, that somebody will take it seriously and somebody will pursue it until the positive resolution. And I think that in his careers, and thanks to the very active work of his office, he was very clear that his office was giving the citizens the voice and was defending their interests when necessary. I also would like to thank the European Parliament for being the host of today's event. I would like to thank them for excellent cooperation which I had with the European Parliament representatives in all the trialogues and the work when we've been putting actually the ECI, the European Citizens Initiative, into the rule book of the European Union. Here particularly I would like to highlight our close cooperation with the Petty Committee, which I think also in the context of the recent years and also in the context of the close relationship with the citizens gain a lot of trust and is working very closely with the citizens and with the petitions, and I can tell you also keeping very busy the European Commission, because as you know later on the Petty Committee is deciding which petitions should be worked on and discussed with the Commissions and which not. So thank you very much for both the European Parliament Petty Committee and especially our Ombudsman for organizing this event today. Now we are here to discuss, I would say, the new tool, new instrument, how the 500 million European citizens could connect more effectively with the European institutions and what the European Union could do better to be in closer touch with our citizens. I know that you've been listening to my colleague, Vice President Reding, this morning, and she was describing in a great detail. I would like to use the year 2013, a European Year of the Citizens, for this reaching out of the European institutions towards the citizens, and also for collecting, I would say, this collective wisdom of the European citizens, what they would like us to do better, what we should focus more in the coming years, and to create this direct opportunity for the interaction. The 2013 will be also an important year for our European Citizens Initiative, because for the first time the citizens are using this new instrument of the direct influence on the EU institutions, and this will be the year when for the first time we will see that the European Citizens Initiative will complete the first full cycle. I think we treat it with a great respect. We treat it very seriously because we see that this is the first transnational participatory democracy tool we have in the European Union, and I'm very glad to say that we see that the citizens also treat it with respect and treat it with a very serious approach. What I mean by that? I have seen that since we launched the ECI the last year, we have now received 25 requests for registration of the ECIs. 14 have been already registered and are currently collecting the signatures with the aim of reaching the threshold of 1 million supporters. And of course, providing that they would reach the geographical balance required in at least the 7 member states, we will move to the next phase, verification of the signatures by the member states, hearing in the parliament, and then of course assessment of the European Commission whether the ECI could eventually become the EU law. One ECI, and I'm very glad that we would have a representative of that ECI here to share the experiences, has already crossed this threshold. This is a Right to Water initiative, which already got more than 1 million names, and as I understand now, they're working on reaching the appropriate geographical balance, so all the requirements will be fulfilled, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to our panelists on the experiences, positive and negative, with the collecting of the signatures. Of course, you heard, and I'm not going to hide the fact that we had the teething problems. At the beginning, they are quite well documented already. Mostly they've been related to the online collection systems, also to the cost of certification and hosting of the system. But I think that they've been also a little bit expected, because if you launch the operation of the scale like the ECI, you will always have the situations where some improvisation and taking care of the teething problems is to be expected. What we tried to do in the Commission was to be as flexible and as helpful as possible, helping with the installation of the open source software, providing our servers in Luxembourg for the organizers, and helping the organizers to get all these systems certified by Luxembourgish authorities, who have been also extremely helpful. I also have to say a very positive word about the German authorities, who actually managed to introduce the verification procedures in exemplary way, and I think the Right to Water initiative is based on their own servers in Germany, which was certified by German authorities, so there is a clear proof that if there is a good administrative approach and good political will, so that this is done, this is possible, and that this would serve both the Luxembourg as a German as a best practice example, which we are not trying to share with other member states to follow. I think what is very important to say is that the ECI really contributed to the start, what I would say, the real pan-European debate between citizens. We have seen how important a role was played by the social media, because they make it much easier for this interaction across the borders, and it allows the European citizens to share better their thoughts, their concerns, their hopes and their ideals. So I think that all this is just the first step in what I would see in the future as a very important step to the forming the transnational European e-democracy platforms in the European Union. Because now the problems we have with the IT, with the certification and verification problems will be put aside once we would have the electronic ID cards, once we would have the compatible platform in our member states, and I'm sure that our citizens will use much more the possibilities to interact if it would be done in a much more user-friendly way. That we would not use our e-ID cards and the chip on them only for storing the health records or personal data, but we would really use them for democratic e-debates. We would use them in the future for elections, as we have already seen in Estonia. And then I believe we'll bring the new element of having the citizens at the one click away from the decision makers, one click away from the participations in the e-debates, which I think will really take a much more prominent place in the European democracy in just a couple of years. Now we can observe in the EU clear development towards the deepening of the European integration, notably in the economic domain, when the Commission gets new powers to comment on budgets or to issue detailed country-specific recommendations on childcare, for instance, or on many other issues which have been just in a recent past considered very much of the domestic domain. At the same time, it's quite evident that there will be stronger and louder calls from citizens to have say in these democratic processes and to be heard and to participate in the debates which are evolving around this closer economic cooperation. So I think that we will see that in order to form a transnational democratic process of this debate, that the young generation, the Facebook or the Twitter generation, would like to use the instruments of participatory democracy like the Citizens' Initiative even more in the future. Today, I think we can say that thanks to the ECI, the citizens for the first time have a real chance to turn these hopes or their views and their concern into something more concrete, and it helps them to get them firmly onto a European agenda. As I said, today we will hear from a couple of the ECIs. They have just done just that. The first, Fraternité 2020, which was the very first ECI to be registered, and as I have already said, Right to Water, which is before its completion of the necessary thresholds, not only in the overall number of the signatories, but also with reaching a necessary geographical balance, so the support would be considered to be valid for this first ECI to have went all the way until the end to get the necessary support from the citizens for the second phase of the ECIs. I think that if you look at this and many other citizens' initiatives, we would see that they really respond to the citizens' concern about the fundamental benefits and the rights of the European Union. They bring in the big picture issues, but also the issues which, for different kind of reason, have been left out of the major focus of the European institutions. And I think that this is very important and this is very healthy for our European debates, because the citizens want to have more say in the freedom to live, work, travel, wherever they are. They would like to have more say in the health and well-being issues, both for the citizens and for the planet. And of course, they would like to live in a society where the social justice is respected. And these are the major topics which were covered by the current ECIs, and I think that we'll see more of that coming once we would complete the first cycle of the first successful ECIs. We see that the demand there are quite steep for the organizers to meet. And therefore, I think that it was a very wise decision to put the revision clause in the initial regulation, because I think that from this first cycle we will learn a lot. I hope that the new technology will bring us the possibilities how to make the system much more user-friendlier, and therefore I believe that the future of the ECIs and the revision process will bring it even closer to the citizens, so we can really work with them in a much more direct way, and the citizens would have a strong feeling that if they really care about something very deeply, if they really want to make their voice heard, they have a clear instruments how to do it. And I think it's in our best interest to cultivate an instrument and to make it as user-friendly and as widely known as possible, so this interaction between the citizens and the European institution will be striving much more in the future than it is right now. Thank you very much, Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Commissioner Šefčovič. I will now present you the panel, as we were sort of at a team change there in the interim. First of all, to the right of Commissioner Šefčovič is Peter Gøtzsche. This is this is the angle of what do? You go to the ombudsman. This was where he's going to describe that relationship of how an ombudsman can help deal with a situation of medical data transparency involving anti-obesity drugs. It's a very interesting case. On my far left is Nõlvak. He is an Estonian entrepreneur and chairman of the Estonian Nature Fund. He's founded a number of IT companies, and he also is the chief motivator, as I see described, of Let's Do It. Now, this is a grassroots organization, so there's the grassroots, of one of the fastest expanding civic movements in history of mobilizing people across Europe to clean the EU up. And third, next to Rainer, is Anne-Marie Perret, and she is the president of the Citizens Committee that is forging ahead with this petition to ensure clean water and sanitation across Europe. That is a European Citizens Initiative. They have gone over the 1 million mark in signatures. They're shooting for the 2 million mark. She is also president of the European Federation of Public Service Unions. So there is the political side to that as well, that they want to fight the liberalization of the water market in Europe. Let's first go, and we hope to go to your questions and comments very quickly, not only in the room but also across Europe to those 30 European Parliament offices that are linked to us right now, streaming, and as well as the tweets across around the world. The Twitter hashtag is EYC. 2013 EO, and I think Gundi's very busy. Gundi Gottesman of the European Ombudsman Office is very, very busy receiving a lot of tweets. We're seeing them pouring in here on the tweet wall. Let's begin with Anne-Marie Perret, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prince. And thank you to Mr. Didier Caluwaerts, the Ombudsman of the EU, and his whole team for this invitation today. And I'd like to wish a warm welcome to all of those who are here and to all of those who are listening to us, at least if not seeing us, and who are also asking questions of us. And I'd also like to thank the main mover in this European movement, Jerry Vandenberg, who's in our union, the European Public Service Unions. He's the man who really bears the responsibility for this European Citizens Initiative. So, thank you, Commissioner Šefčovič, for your comments on the question of the ECIs. As you've indicated, and as Mr. Brent said, it is true that we are proud to have more than 1 million signatures. We're at about, well, almost 1.4 million signatures, but we have to strike this balance among the different countries, and I'll come back to that. Now, in our trade union federation and with other organizations, NGOs at European level too, we have taken as an opportunity 2 levels. World level in the UN because it's the International Year for Water Cooperation, and then at European level this year for citizens initiatives. Now, concerning water, I'd like to recall 2 things. That first of all, in 2000 there was a directive adopted on water in which it was indicated that water isn't a good to be traded. It's not a commodity. It's not a commercial service as we see for other goods. We call water a common good. And then in the UN in 2010 there was this resolution adopted which made it possible for us to move forward and which considers that water is a fundamental right. And that's what we based our campaign on, the right to water. And of course, we have based ourselves on the Lisbon Treaty to obtain through this ECI that the Commission should really seriously examine legislation on water on the basis of water as a right, not on the basis of water as a commodity, which should be subject to competition. And that's why we're here today. And once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Diamandouros. Through this citizens' initiative, we want you as citizens to be as active as possible. And after a short presentation by video and PowerPoint, I will urge you to sign and get signed this European Citizens Initiative. So I'd like to ask the technicians to get the video going. Thank you.
En 2010, les Nations Unies reconnaissent le droit universel à l'eau et l'assainissement, essentiel à la réalisation de tous les droits de l'homme. Cette initiative était censée augmenter l'accès à l'eau et l'assainissement pour des millions de personnes qui sont privées de ces services, même en Europe. Et pourtant, ça n'a pas été le cas. Les gouvernements doivent prendre la responsabilité de garantir des services de distribution d'eau pour tous et protéger les ressources en eau pour les générations futures. L'eau est un service public et un bien commun. Elle ne doit pas être laissée à la loi du marché. La libéralisation ne fera qu'augmenter le fossé entre les riches et les pauvres, éloignant encore pour ces derniers la perspective d'une vie décente. De nombreux citoyens sont inquiets pour l'avenir des services de distribution de l'eau. En effet, les institutions européennes veulent libéraliser ces services au lieu d'en garantir la qualité et l'accessibilité aux consommateurs. Fournir l'eau et l'assainissement à tous représente un défi à l'échelle mondiale. Mais dans un premier temps, l'Union européenne et les États membres doivent garantir ces services pour tous au sein même de l'Europe. Puis, ils devront intensifier leurs efforts pour atteindre un accès universel. La Fédération syndicale européenne des services publics, en collaboration avec d'autres organisations ainsi que des particuliers, ont décidé de lancer une initiative citoyenne européenne afin de maintenir l'eau comme service public et bien commun. Si plus d'1 million de citoyens européens signent cette initiative, la Commission européenne devra développer une législation afin de garantir le droit humain à l'eau et l'assainissement pour tous. Pour cela, nous avons besoin de votre signature, de votre engagement, de votre soutien. Aidez-nous. Signez la pétition.
Voilà, je vais demander également de...
Then I'd like to ask that the PowerPoint presentation be started up too, so that I can go through this quickly. So, water is a human right. But you see in this little cartoon that it says, oh, we need water for everybody. And then the person opposite him says, oh, yes, I agree completely, but who's going to pay? So, there's this duality between a right, how to exercise it, how to make it a fundamental universal right, and on the contrary, if we're still thinking in market terms and competition, what we're asking is that there not be liberalization, because for us, water is a common good, a public essential service for everyone. So in terms of our demands, we're asking that water supplies and its treatment isn't subject to competition. We want the European Commission to establish legislation and regulations which would guarantee access to water and to sanitation for everyone in the 27 member states. And on the basis of that legislation, like for the Tobin tax or the Robin Hood tax, we would want this to go even further, and that what was consecrated by the UN become a reality, that is to make worldwide access to water and sanitation possible. Now, what we want through the 1.4 million signatures already collected is that the mentalities in the European Union, and here I'm looking more directly at the Commission, that the Commission change in its approach, which is based on the market and competition, to move toward an attitude of public service and to approach which is much more based on rights. And through this citizens' initiative, what's important is to give people the means of acting directly. And we know how concerned citizens are. The problem of water is a problem of fundamental rights. Nevertheless, I'm not going to read everything that's on this slide, but I'd just like to recall that there is this problem between a fundamental right and access for everyone. Now, access for everyone. Last April, an employee of Veolia, one of the big French multinationals, was dismissed because he'd refused to cut the water supply to a poor family. And his employer, Veolia, got rid of him because, as a multinational, Veolia considered that this family, even if it was so impoverished, weren't paying their bills. And then there's this battle, ongoing battle, not with fundamental rights, but with people saying that it's just a commercial service, it's a good. And it's the Director General of Nestle who said, I'm sorry, if we're going to privatize water, I don't see any problem. Now in France, and we discussed this with Mr. Burns, we're a bit schizophrenic. I mean, I'm French. I'm the president of the Citizens Committee for the CCI. And I know that in my very own country, there are at least two big multinationals, Suez and Veolia, who are leaders in this area of water and sanitation. But in France and elsewhere, we have the support of local representatives, national elected representatives, and also at European level too we have support, because we have established an organization which is in line with what the Commission asked us to do in the context of the CCI. We have seen to it that we're working with other organizations that you can see here. Of course, we've set up a citizens committee. There are 33 members of it. And then we saw to it as well that we set up teams to work on the ground. And then there are ambassadors. That is, people that are perhaps well known in our different countries, which got the initiative really going. In Germany, at least, is that there was almost a tsunami unleashed because we had the support of a very important person, and behind him we got this over 1 million signatures just in Germany. So, as Obama said, yes, we can. And the idea now, at the present stage, is to try to strike this balance among the different countries, because 1.365 million signatures is wonderful, but of course we have to meet other criteria, which is a balance among different countries and their populations. So in France, we've got 11 million signatures. We need 55 million. I mean, the message that I want to put across today is go onto the internet site of the Right to Water and sign, and get your friends to sign. I thank you very much.
Anne-Marie Perret, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Anne-Marie Perret.
De la pétition.
Now, concerning this petition, this European Citizens Initiative, we've heard about it. Now let's look at the way we look at it.
Building a clean and healthy Europe, there's also the question of health for the citizen. And this is what Peter Gøtzsche is going to address. He's the director of the Nordic Cochrane Center. And he went in 2007 to the Ombudsman. He went over to Nikiforos and he said, hey, the European Medicines Agency refused access to clinical study reports and trial protocols for 2 anti-obesity drugs. Tell us about that.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Oh, it went out, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the invitation. We don't know how to use our drugs safely. In the United States and Europe, drugs are the 3rd leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer. The major reason for this is that the drug industry conceals the data on harms of their drugs. They publish only half of their trials, and what they publish is often seriously misleading. Anti-obesity drugs are dangerous, and we therefore applied for access in 2007 to unpublished studies of these drugs at the European Medicines Agency that the drug companies had submitted to obtain marketing authorization. Now, the EMA's director, Thomas Lundgren, denied us access, and we therefore complained to the Ombudsman. Lundgren's arguments were the following: protection of commercial interests, no overriding public interest, administrative burden involved, and worthlessness of the data after the EMA had redacted them. So, we rejected these arguments, and the Ombudsman agreed with us. He inspected the documents at the EMA's headquarters and concluded they contained nothing of commercially sensitive nature. But the EMA was completely resistant to arguments. They still refused to give us access. It was only when the Ombudsman in 2010 accused the EMA of in a press release of maladministration that they changed their stance and gave us the documents. Now, Thomas Lundgren left the agency a few months later to take up a consulting job for the drug industry, although this was clearly forbidden according to the EMA's own rules, which operate with a quarantine period of 2 years. The EMA's new director, Guido Rassi, has a very different view of transparency. From January 2014, the EMA aims to provide public access not only to clinical study reports and protocols, but to the raw data in statistical programs for new drugs that allow the citizens to check the data for themselves. Now, this is tremendous progress for public health, but the drug industry is trying to prevent this from happening. 2 companies have sued the EMA at the European Court, and if they succeed to prevent disclosure of documents, we doctors will continue killing our patients in gigantic numbers because we don't know what the harms of our drugs are. This is scandalous. The European Commission's proposed revision of the Clinical Trials Directive has suggested that we will get access to summaries of drug trials. That's good, but it's not enough. Summaries are often misleading. We need access to the full study reports and the raw data, just like the EMA has promised to provide us. If we get that, it will prevent us from having double standards in the European Union, one for the EMA and one for other drug trials. It will also reduce the risk of cheating when we can check what the drug industry has done. Again, tremendous progress for public health. Now, actually, this would also speed up drug innovation in the European Union, because when other companies can see the mistakes other companies have made because they can see the data, then they can avoid repeating the mistakes. So don't forget this. This is important. Now, there is something fundamentally wrong with the way we prioritize in healthcare if we, for career or commercial purposes, important data are being withheld that are important for rational decision-making by doctors and patients. Also, we don't want to live in societies that have just one version of the truth, and this is not how science should be. Science should be checked by other people than those who have a formidable commercial interest in keeping data secret and manipulating with the data that they publish. This must stop. Therefore, next month, members of the Parliament will vote about all the amendments to the Clinical Trials Directive. I certainly hope the members will vote for more than a summary, because then a lot of trials will have been wasted. and we will continue to exploit patients for commercial or career gains. We should not accept that. Just like clean water is a fundamental right, so is clean, trustworthy data from medical research a fundamental right. It concerns every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter Gøtzsche. Let's move on then quickly to Heino Nõlvak, who has, as we said just a moments ago, that he has organized a world cleanup campaign, and that is sort of the grassroots aspect. We've seen the petition part, we've seen the ombudsman recourse, and now the grassroots. Let's hear it about grassroots, Heino.
Thank you. You know, I come from a small island next to Estonian coast. It's called Hiiumaa. It took me about a day to come here. So I had a long time to think about it. And seeing all those people on Twitter here, I would really ask you to do a favor for me. What if we put our hands together for the guys who actually care for Europe, and they're willing to stick there for 3 hours just to look what we're doing here. So why don't we give them an applause? Thank you. I've seen comments like it's a bit boring. It's long speeches, so I wouldn't do that. There's a simple thing I want to share with you. This is a dream. It's a small dream we had in Estonia. You know, after Soviet legacy, it was kind of common to dump your trash in the countryside, and it was getting exceedingly common to the point that it was actually making me pretty angry and a bunch of my friends. So we thought we'd make a last desperate effort to get it to do something about it. And there is the tiny video you'd see in a moment about it, if you bear in mind. Yeah, I hope we can see it.
We live on a beautiful planet, but we are trashing it day by day. Waste is everywhere. Beaches, cities, forests, even in oceans. In Europe, there is a small country called Estonia. Over half of its territory is covered with pristine forests. However, the forests were decorated with household and construction waste. Many people believed it is acceptable to bring their garbage to the forest, and they had been doing that for years. But there was a group of people who believed that all this could be changed.
The campaign was born so that at first I got an idea, what if we cleaned up Estonia?
Mida võiks ära teha, siis Rainer ütles, et stopp, et selle me teeme ära küll, aga me teeme selle ära 1 päeva jooksul.
Jah, sellist asja polnud kunagi varem tehtud ja esiotsa ei olnud meil õrna aimugi, kuidas seda teha. Aga me olime kindlad, et seda on võimalik teha.
The idea was named Let's Do It, and the plan was to clean up 10,000 tons of waste in just one day. To do that, it was necessary to engage at least 40,000 volunteers. But how to do it? The first step was to create a team with the best professionals in Estonia. A grassroots initiative was launched. In a few weeks, there was a team of 20 volunteers, which eventually grew to 620 people.
Inimesed, keda me projekti kaasasime, olid oma ala töölised professionaalid. Ja nad tegid seda sellepärast, et see oli neile oluline.
The second step was to get the people, organizations, communities to gather enough support for the idea and find reliable partners. Initiators realized from the start that they needed the support of the entire society, so they went on to win the support of opinion leaders, NGOs, top IT specialists, the largest enterprises, politicians, the media, even the president, gathering eventually more than 500 official partners.
Iga firma panustas siis vastavalt sellele, mis ressursid tal olid, et kes tuli meile appi oma töötajatega, kes andis meile oma töövahendeid, prügiautosid, kes andis meile oma reklaamipindu.
Meile öeldi, et projekti lõpufaasis olime me nagu maffia. Keegi ei saanud meile ära öelda.
The first step was to locate and estimate the type and amount of garbage, creating the virtual garbage map.
See ei olnud raske kokku kombineerida Google Earthi ja mitmeid muid tarkvaralisi juppe, mis on kõik vabalt saadaval. ja lõpptulemusena sündis siis väga lahe tarkvara, kus inimesed said oma mobiiltelefoniga metsas ringi kõndides vajutada nupule ja öelda, et siinkohas on nüüd prügihunnik ja kaadril läks automaatselt selle siis telefoni asukoht ja pilt, mida inimene samal ajal tegi, kõik toimus reaalajas. Väga lõbus oli kaardistamise nädalavahetusel istuda arvuti taga ja vaadata, kuidas need Eestit punktid muudkui tuli sinna kaardi peale.
In total, 720 volunteers took part in the mapping process, and 10,656 trash points were located on the map. But the most important question remained: how to get 40,000 people to clean it all up.
Meie esimene ülesanne oli tegelikult üldse inimestele nii-öelda silme ette tuua, et mis olukord valitseb ja siis ka see olukord nii-öelda ära kaardistada, et siis näidata, mis on tõelised suurusjärgud. Seda ei olnud keegi varem teinud ega isegi mõelnud.
Teiseks me korraldasime meediakampaania. Sellest sai suurim kampaania, mis Eesti seadus tehtud on. Ja selle maksumuseks kujunes 0 krooni.
Estonian well-known actors, musicians, and cultural leaders gave their voice and face to the campaign for free. All of a sudden, Let's Do It was everywhere. The action of 40,000 needed to be organized. We asked people to register as teams via the internet. Each team was responsible for cleaning up certain trash points.
Kuskil 2 nädalat enne registreerimise lõppu oli meil umbes 10 000 inimest registreerinud ja siis me mõtlesime küll, et mis me nüüd teeme.
On that day, the most impossible dreams came true. More than 50,000 people came out to participate, and the rest followed the process via all the media channels. That's 4% of a population of 1.3 million, which would equal 15.3 million in the United States or 57 million in India. There were also Americans, Russians, Germans, Swedish, Finns, Chinese, Lithuanians. The international media was following the most ambitious volunteer action in modern times. News of the event reached all around the globe. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken the government 3 years and 22.5 million euros for doing it. But it was done for €500,000 and in only 1 day. On the 3rd of May 2008, the whole territory of Estonia was cleaned of its garbage in 5 hours. We did it!
Ma loodan, et meie lugu teid inspireerib. Ja ma usun siiralt, et seda projekti saab teha ka teie kodumaal. See ei maksa palju ja see on kõigest 1 päev.
Let's do it!
Thank you. When I got here, we talked to Mr. Diamandouros, and he asked me, could I help to engage citizens, because this is what we do. Well, to me, engaging citizens, if you ask, like, how do you engage citizens, it's like a question, how do you make a monkey jump? It's people are not to be engaged. People, they already engaged. And sometimes I feel that we should engage politicians in the real world. And if I hear this, I heard this in panel earlier, that we should make citizens understand. I think we should make politicians understand. And you shouldn't applaud, actually. This is one other good point. This was a lead of thought which would get you quickly to the debate where we're at in Europe, where everybody is pissed off on everybody else, or the European Commission. I think if we're going to be taking sides, this is where you're going to end up always in a pretty shitty situation. We don't have that time and luxury at the moment. I think what we could do is we could get things done together. And believe me, this is cool. This is something we've done there. We converted a problem of waste into the fun. And this is doable. This is, I mean, we're not an environmental movement. Frankly, I have to admit, I hate cleanups. I just love clean. And, you know, we might do it a few more times, but not really much. As a matter of fact, last year we had 96 countries participating in a world cleanup. That's just, you know, blow my mind. How could that be possible? Everybody had the same problem. But it's not the waste we're picking on the ground. It's mostly waste we're picking from our brains. That's what we do. We're social change. This is what we do. We tell people this is okay to do things together, to share the values. I think this is what it's about. And you know what's great thing about grassroots is that you can keep your authenticity. You can be true to yourself. See, if you look on the structures like companies, so they have those big hierarchies, and I think they're good for producing boxes, many boxes. And if we are like, you know, be viewed as a consumption machines, then this is okay. But I think if we really think about how to run the society, then what quickly emerges now is a network structure where, you know, there are many things we don't need from those hierarchies because, you know, we can do it directly, we can do it quicker. And I think this is what we're witnessing now. This is why young people don't vote, because voting is so 19th century. I mean, it is. If politicians have long speeches, this is so 19th century. And I mean, that's as simple as it is. I mean, you can tell how to engage, and you can debate about it, but people will perfectly get engaged the moment they see it makes a point. And that's what we've seen in many places. Like the cleanup we had in Kosovo last year. This was the first time they had a national event where 35,000 people get together, and they didn't ask support for the European Commission. They just, you know, they did an event by themselves. Or a team in Bosnia where the Muslims and Christians worked together as one team to clean the country. And I believe this is something new happening here, or perhaps this is something very old we're discovering. And it's striking how similar we are down below. This is not just, you know, Europeans, it's everywhere. We're seeking for something which is pure. And I think this purity has been lost from politics a long time ago. And I mean, you can blame me as being idealist, but I think this is the only way to get things done, if you dream into something which is bright. And at least for me, this dream of a clean world keeps me ticking. You know, I can even go to my shore on the island after the storm and pick up stuff which floats there from Denmark or Sweden or Germany. Just by knowing that the other people in their countries will do their job, and eventually we're going to get this planet cleaned. I mean, it was not such a long time ago, perhaps 1,000 years ago, we could drink from rivers, and it's why don't we do it again? If we'd really clean the Europe, just picture it, how could that be? I mean, there's plenty of new jobs in this process. I mean, we need to redesign almost everything. We could perhaps give the thought about it, how to align our identities with this clean world. It's not just about demanding anything, but we would just be creating something new and really fragile and beautiful. That's about it. I'm not for much of a long talks, and I'm not much of a talker, so thank you very much.
Heine Nõlvak, thank you very much. These are all very concrete issues, driven by some dreams too. I think it's great to combine the dream with the concrete. Do we have any questions and comments out there in the audience? That's great. I'm watching. Let's go quickly to the tweet wall.
Yeah, there are plenty of tweets coming in, as you can see, and there are also a lot of direct questions to the speaker, so I will really invite you to answer to the more specific questions yourself. Just to pick up some general questions, especially also for Commissioner Šefčovič, there's a question from the Sofia event. When will we feel the effect of the ECIs? And how long do the procedures last? Just to give an idea of how long this all takes. There's also a tweet from the European Year of Citizens Alliance. Why do EU institutions reduce citizens' participation at EU level to ECIs? As we've seen, there's so many other ways of getting involved for citizens. Then there's quite a concern of a lot of tweeters about minority rights, We have a question from the Polish EP office event. How do you want to improve an active citizenship of groups like minorities, ethnical, religious, etc.? And we get a lot of tweets also on the Roma question. How do you ensure in Europe the equal citizenship for Roma and travelers? That's another very important block here. And then a very big tweet activity is on the subject of the young people. Almost all the EP offices send questions through. There's an event in the Piedmont Ombudsman's office, for example, who are asking, what is the EU strategy to motivate young people to vote in the upcoming EU elections? And the Dutch Parliament office would like to know, how can the interests of youth, those who cannot vote yet, so even younger people, best be incorporated in EU policy? And the Swedish EP office is asking the audience in Sweden, one major social problem in Europe is youth unemployment. How does the EU tackle this problem? And last but not least on this is another tweet from the European Parliament office in Portugal, also related to youth. Shouldn't the EU be concerned with education in improvement in order to create a more united European citizenship? Just to reflect a few, but there are many more on these issues.
Great, thank you, Gunde. And let's go out to the audience as well. Madame, I think you had a comment, question? Yes.
Yes, my name is Margrethe Augen. I'm a member of Parliament from the Green Group from Denmark, and I'm the coordinator in the Petitions Committee. Just have one remark on the Citizens' Initiative, and that's an answer also to several other questions. We try to, and I hope Sefcovic will help us, to make a decent treatment on these citizen initiatives results. We try to make it so that we have an equal treatment, where we organize a real hearing, where the Petitions Committee will be the mainstreaming committee, making sure that the Commission came at high level, representing the Commission, also the committee concerned, so that we can prepare and also deliver some kind of qualified. We cannot promise the citizens that they will we can take the decisions they want us to do, but put it at the agenda in a serious way. That's quite important, and I really hope that this initiative from us, from the Parliament, will be made a little bit more friendly than some of the others have been made from the Commission. That's one point. And now the second point on the clinical trials. I'm of course very happy for the work done from the Ombudsman on this year, but I've just warned you, coming from a Nordic tradition for Ombudsmen, what is threatening us just now is that in this Parliament there's a tendency to share everything among two parties and turn everything down to two parties and have a party political ombudsman. And whatever extraordinary qualified candidates they might present, coming from the Nordic tradition, and I think you, Nikiforos, is also from the Nordic tradition, it's nothing to do with your country of origin. Coming from the Nordic tradition of the ombudsman, it's so important, and I need everybody's help here, to avoid that we are making this to a party political issue and battlefield. I wouldn't call it neutrality, but impartiality is very important. And to ensure the citizens' trust to the institution. It is the only institution we have outside all this here. Keep it, and that's an appeal. I have the best audience for that appeal just here. That's why I took the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think some questions are unavoidably political, but let's go to a gentleman over here, and we'll have your answers after this. I'd like to assemble a number of questions, and then we'll answer them.
Bruno Boissière, je représente le...
Bruno Boissière, I represent the International Centre for Training, and I'm also a former member of the European Parliament myself. I think it's clear that the European Citizens' Initiative is changing the method used. I had the opportunity to listen to the people who were talking today, saying that they've not only changed the method but also the end objective, giving Europe a more human face, and doing this with the new means that we have available to us. I was very interested to hear from the European Citizens Initiative representatives, and I'd like to know exactly what you think about the bottom-up method as opposed to the top-down method, and how that can help us to achieve our objectives, which I think we all share as human beings. Albert Schweitzer was saying that providing an example isn't the best way of changing things, it's the only way of changing things. And you gave us an example in Estonia, and then you explained that this same example had been followed in Kosovo and Bosnia, I think, as well, if I remember correctly. So how much can local action really contribute to us achieving our objectives and help with the improvement of the European Citizens Initiative in the future?
We have the Commissioner to answer first. Mr. Shevchuk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burns. Just try to answer in my answer to most of the questions which have been put by our Twitter friends and also here in the audience. The first question was about when we would feel the effects of the European Citizens Initiative. I think it's already happening. I think we see that the discussion we have today, the debates which actually are very much on since the European Citizens Initiative was launched, are already bringing the new dimension of participatory democracy to the European Union. We never have spoken about the direct participation and direct influencing of the EU by the citizens as often and as much as before. And I think that this is very healthy. This is very healthy development, because I agree with the last speaker. It makes the Europe plus humaine, and I think this is what we need, especially in the difficult times through which the European Union is going through right now. What will be the timelines? What will be the procedures? You know, because of the initial problem with the software, the Commission decided to extend the period in which the signatures could be collected. So we would see the first one-year period come to a close in November of this year. Then there are a couple of weeks needed from the Member States for the verifications of the signatures, and then I can promise Madam Auken that I will do my best and that of course we will treat all the successful ECIs with the dignity. So the promise from the Commission's stands. There will be the high-level meeting between the organizers and the relevant commissioners or directors general, and I also believe that the European Parliament will play its role to organize the hearing as appropriate way, because I think what would be very important there is not only to create a good opportunity for the organizers to share their experience and to present the case again, but also to have a discussions where various angles of that proposal will be discussed, will be elaborated on, and will give the guidance to the European Commission, which in the end will have to issue the communication how to proceed with the ECI. But I have seen it already today, and I can tell you that also in the College of Commissioners, I'm getting questions from my colleagues, because they see that how the ECIs are developing, how they are supported by the citizens, what kind of concrete topics they are bringing in, and I think they're already influencing the debate we have in the College, that are influencing the works of the Commission. So I think that the citizens' voice is heard already right now, because we see how they can mobilize the people. So I think that more of it will be coming in the future, because we have seen how the social media platforms can mobilize the citizens and what kind of message they can put across. We saw it with certain international agreements. We see it in the democratizing swings and moods and developments and movements in the entire world. And we see it also that they have very strong mobilizing factor here in the European Union. And I think more the user-friendlier the system would be, more we would use the e-tool, and we'll be able to deploy the digital agenda better in the European Union. More of this e-democracy and e-chats we would have directly with the decision makers, and they will be very clearly important for shaping up of the agenda. The Roma issues, young people, just by one sentence, I think I'm from Slovakia, where there is a quite important Roma minority, and I'm very glad that the Roma issues are now treated on the European level as well. Because simply, I think it took us some time in the European Union to realize that this is not simply an issue which is framed in the national borders. We have to find the European solutions to these issues. We have to learn from each other, and we have to work on the best practices we have in the European Union. And therefore, I'm very glad that now the process where there is the EU strategy for Roma minorities, and where there is a clear requirement that each member state will come up with a national strategy how to improve the life of Roma, is now the obligation for each member state, which is collectively assessed and judged. I think is the right way to approach this issue. How can we alleviate the plight of the Roma people in the European Union? And I can tell you that the Commission takes it very seriously. The young people go through the unprecedented, difficult time in the European Union. This is probably the best educated generation of Europeans since the Second World War, and still we have a problem that they represent the highest proportion of unemployed people in the European Union. So what we need to do? Clearly, I think the one indication is that we have to improve our educational systems. So we will have to improve what is taught at our universities, how the teachings are adjusted to what the labour market needs. And we need also to help the young people immediately, now, so we will not have a lost generation in the European Union. How to do it? What we are trying to do in the European Union and from the side of the European Commission, beside the soft powers we have, because you know that many of these things, if it comes to education and social affairs, are in the hands of the member states, we are trying to mobilize the budget we have. We created these 8 action teams in the countries where the unemployment of young people is the most pressing point, where we are together with the member states trying to mobilize this money in a way that they would create very clearly new places, workplaces for the young people. So far it works. We will assess it in the meantime, and I'm very glad that the European Council decided also from the new financial perspective, I think that €6 billion was put aside exactly for these projects which should help to the young people. And of course, I hope that all this would be done in synergies with the member states, so the results could be there long-lasting and not simply for 1 or 2 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to, if we can, because we're down to 20 minutes now, and I'd like to keep as many answers we move along. Let's, however, go to Anne-Marie, because there was that question from Bruno about the question of la dimension du bottom-up. If you could address that, please.
Deux réponses.
Well, I think I have 2 responses here. Firstly, focusing on the effects of the ECIs, because we are right in the middle of them now, and so we can't yet evaluate the effects. Because firstly, of course, we've got to look at the submission of the petitions, either in electronic format or in written format, and then these have to be handed to the Commission. And then I don't know if it's 2 or 3 months, I think perhaps 3 months, that the Commission has to respond. It's only after that point, at least for our initiative on the right of access to water, it's only at that point that the Commission will look at a legislative option, or that it will then and in fact this is something that Isabelle Durand was saying, this will then be looked at a Parliament level as well, and I think that is linked to this idea of bottom-up, because what we can't manage to get done at the very highest level, we just start again right at the bottom and go back up again. Then, as regards the methods used for achieving our aims towards European construction, well, I think we see through our initiative on water that there are commitments being made at local level. Here I mean elected officials within communes and local areas. Here too, I think it's important for us to have look at a human element. We have got a Charter of Fundamental Rights. It is now integrated in the Lisbon Treaty, and it's perhaps here too, with that battle as well, that we need to commit ourselves and really focus. And I think these European citizens' initiatives can help us also to rebalance the situation, to strike a balance between what's done really quite quietly in the background, if you like, the lobbying activity, and we all know how much weight the lobby organisations have within the European institutions. And I think that once the active citizens' initiatives and activities, once they're up and running, and maybe I'm being a little bit naive and unrealistic here, but I think that might be able to provide us with a little bit more visibility. It might really encourage more citizens to get involved and to say, yes, okay, great, I'm actually being listened to and I'm being heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Let me go quickly to Heino, because I think of two of these questions, especially about youth. And when we saw that video that you showed, there were a lot of youth in there. And a lot of them that seem to be less than voting age. How then, as we heard from the Dutch European Parliament office and elsewhere, how do you get the youth involved, and it seemed like you did that quite successfully, and motivate, especially next year, those who are of voting age, to recognize that this year is the year of the citizen and next year is the year of the European Parliament vote?
How to motivate them for voting, I have no clue. If you'd want to touch those people, you need to be honest. That's pretty simple to say, but actually, those people are used to tell what they think. They have no background from the times we've had.
So it's a matter of language, then, we're talking about, right?
It is the matter of having your heart and speak your mind. It's really different from politics.
I mean, the use of words.
Yes.
Which words are you going to use?
No, you don't get me. No. Frankly, it's not about words. This is about what you feel. And it always strikes me how people think that they can play with words and make kind of impression. Truth is, it's not possible.
But how do you give youth and young voters enough so what to go to that urn and put their vote in the urn?
Put it really bluntly, if we're in shit, we say that we're in shit. And let's clean it up together. This is how they are part of it.
Right. Gundi, do we have any more tweets to talk about?
Well, just maybe two more direct questions, because we have to keep it short here. From the Polish EP office, there's a question to you, Rainer. From your experience, how can we efficiently raise interest of the politicians in these local initiatives? And maybe one question to be added to the Ombudsman afterwards. The Romanian EP office would like to know how you are actually cooperating with the national and regional ombudsman, because that's very important for the people on the spot as well.
Okay. Any other questions out there that we could entertain? Yes, sir.
Andris Gobiņš, Eiropas Ekonomikas un Sociālo lietu.
Andris Gobiņš, Economic and Social Committee of Europe. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be here and participate in this discussion together with the national debates. The national level is very important. It is important to also have the national discussions, not only in Brussels, and this is a good example to others. I wanted to ask, this is European Citizens' Year, and this year is an opportunity for achieving some specific results. Maybe you, as well as the Commissioner, could give some examples of proactive actions. What have you done to make people or to communicate with people better? Could you give some examples that encourage people to participate and to be active. Thank you.
Very much. And I have a question over here, Madame.
Hello, my name is Rachel Tansey. I work for Corporate Europe Observatory. And I wanted to follow up on the point that one side is getting policymakers to listen to citizens. And the other side of the question, where we're talking about ECIs, what the outcome will be, the Commission has to seriously consider the points that are made in such an ECI. But by that point, we already have the interests of particular commercial interests, big businesses, who are listened to via lobbyists through expert groups dominated by industry. The process of the revolving door, where we saw the example of Thomas Lundgren in the European Medicines Agency, who you see these examples where, for career reasons, for narrow commercial reasons, public good policymaking is undermined. Policymaking in the interests of citizens is undermined. So my question to the Commissioner is, what does the Commission plan to do to make sure that there is a much greater balance between listening to the voices of citizens compared to those of narrow commercial interests through undue access and influence? And to the Ombudsman, you are currently looking at a complaint made by my organisation and several other NGOs about how the Commission deals with the revolving door and implements its own rules on conflicts of interest in particular. But until we see the outcome of that complaint, what do you think needs to change in a in a structural or kind of political, cultural way to have better public interest policy making? Thank you.
Okay, Nikiforos, can we go to you first? There are a number of issues there.
Thank you. There's been a large number of questions addressed to me. Let me do something unorthodox. Let me just try and respond by putting a number of things together, okay? And then I will try and address a few of the specific issues also. If time allows, you'll tell me.
10 minutes.
All right.
For everything.
Listen, let me just select sound bites, okay? Commissioner Šefčovič is talking about things, and he says it's happening as we speak. Okay? Then we get bottom up. Then we get la dimension humaine. Then we get be honest. Okay? And I think what we're looking at here, and this is I think what this event represents above all, par excellence, as well as last year's event, we're looking at a very, very sudden, major impact on our society that's being brought about by rapid impact of IT and particularly social media. We're looking at a very rapid transformation of the way in which the dialogue is being conducted and how we are engaging with contact with one another. And this is exactly what we're doing right now, this minute, okay, with the 30 cities interacting with us and with you being here and asking questions. And I think we're at the very beginning of a very steep learning curve, which is going to move us in a very different direction, in the way we're actually engaged among ourselves and engaged with citizens. So I want to record that. I want to say that the Ombudsman feels that we have, to a certain extent, part of our hand on the pulse of this kind of development. And I don't want to brag. I don't want to offer self-congratulatory statements. I want to say we acknowledge a reality, and this reality is beginning, in fact, to emerge very rapidly. And we want to make certain that you and we, because the Ombudsman is there as the link between citizens and the European Union, you and we will respond to you, are able to actually move things forward. And this is exactly what my office has been trying to do for the past 10 years. And I very much hope that my successors will do that. So this is the very major thing. Yes, to have, the Ombudsman is described very often as the human face of the EU bureaucracy towards the citizens, okay? We're trying to do that. It's for you to hold us accountable, because as you hold us accountable, and I'm speaking also to the citizens in the other 30 cities, we are able to do our work better. So that's what you should keep doing, what you've been doing. And then if that happens, then of course we will have more of a bottom-up situation, more of a dimension humaine, and more honesty as far as I'm concerned. This is exactly what I'm trying to do. Now, having said that, let me also answer some very specific questions. First of all, I'd like to thank Mrs. Auken for her remarks. As you can understand, as the incumbent European Ombudsman, I am not allowed to speak or comment on the process for electing my successor. So I very much hope that the Parliament will do, in its wisdom, what it has done in the past and produce a good ombudsman for the future. In that connection, I wish to acknowledge the presence in our midst of at least 4 ombudsmen. Present right now is Mr. Szabo, the National Ombudsman of Hungary, Mrs. O'Reilly, the National Ombudsman of Ireland, earlier on Mr. Alex Brenningmeijer, the National Ombudsman of the Netherlands, and also we have a candidate for the Ombudsman office, Mr. Marcus Jäger, a senior official from the European, from the Council of Europe. I wish them all well in their success in making certain that this institution will continue to do what it has been doing for citizens in the years to come. How does the European Ombudsman relate with the national ombudsman? We have a very powerful network which we've put together over the past 18 years, beginning with my successor. It's a network that brings together all the national and regional ombudsmen in the European Union. We get together every 2 years, 2 years for the nationals, alternate years for the regionals, so we can have meaningful debates on meaningful issues. This is coordinated by the European Ombudsman's Office. We have a special dedicated section of our website, and we have also a daily electronic newspaper for the purposes of our national ombudsman. You can always go to your national ombudsman to reach us. You can come directly to us. We will be able to, in fact, transmit messages. This is one of the important mechanisms for citizens to reach out to ombudsmen, either at the European or the national level. The Ombudsman is very much concerned about minority rights. The Ombudsman is very much concerned about Roma in particular because they are particularly vulnerable. The Ombudsman is very much concerned about the problems of youth. And also, I should add, very much concerned and actively involved in defending the rights of people with disabilities. The European Union has signed its first ever convention with the United Nations, and we're in the process now of setting up a mechanism, a framework, we call it in bureaucratic language, a mechanism through which we will be able to actually monitor the implementation of this particular UN treaty on the European Union soil, and the Ombudsman is one of the 3 participants in this framework, along with the Commission, in the Parliament, of course, and we hope to be able to very vigilantly follow this issue. We also receive very many complaints, and we act very much in a number of areas concerning the defense of minority rights, because the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union is now legally binding on the member states when applying EU law, and is clearly binding on all the EU institutions at all times, and there you have absolute legal guarantees of the rights of minorities, of all kinds. So that, I think, is another area where I can tell you the Ombudsman is vigilant, the Ombudsman is very much involved. I'd like to simply respond to the question from Corporate Europe Observatory to say, perfectly well, this is a case that's ongoing, and therefore I cannot comment on an ongoing case. Once we have it resolved, of course, we'll be able to say that. The Ombudsman has been on record as, of course, being very, again, vigilant in terms of maintaining the principles of the rule of law when it comes to, in fact, how the Commission or other institutions implement their own obligations concerning, practices that I generally refer to as under revolving doors. But I have to examine the merits of the case before I can come up to any decision, and I'm not there yet. And this is said in the presence of the Commissioner who is responsible for that, but this is in fact where we stand right now. If I had advanced further, I'd be able to say something more. Otherwise, I would be unfair both to the complainant and to the institution, and therefore I cannot do that. Examples of practices, specific examples. I think that Mr. Gøtzsche gave you one very important example. We are very pleased that we were able to actually reverse a long-standing policy of the European Medicines Agency with respect to providing access to medical information in clinical trials. To put it to you differently, when I arrived in the Union 10 years ago, there were 8 decentralized agencies in the European Union. There are now about 43. Very many of them are regulatory agencies whose activities literally touch the daily lives of citizens in the member states. Food, medicines, environment, frontiers, chemicals, all of these things have to do with the daily lives of people. And all of these are under my mandate. I have visited every single one of them. And I have in fact launched a particular procedure for being able to ensure that these agencies observe their obligations under the Charter of Fundamental Rights, observe their obligations under EU law, and are in fact conscious of the need to apply EU law in order to be able to provide citizens with the opportunities to be able to know their rights and to enjoy their rights. So this would be the EMA would be one example. The own initiatives that I've launched concerning all the agencies and the visits that I've done to about 18 or 19 of them so far, all the major ones except for the food agency that I have not yet been able to go to in Parma, Italy, I think constitute additional examples. Final example, the Ombudsman has for the past 10 years been steadfastly trying to push forward the frontiers of transparency in the European Union and the frontiers, if you please, of accountability within the European Union. Last year we published a report. We were able to report 82% compliance of all the institutions to our recommendations, and I will leave it to the citizens to judge whether this is an acceptable figure or not. I would say that our biggest, in quotation marks, customer, I don't like that term, is the Commission. It's 2/3 of the complaints that we receive are against the Commission. Again, in the presence of the Commissioner responsible for interinstitutional affairs, I will say that this is not a reflection of the fact that the Commission has a particularly problematic administration. On the contrary, it has a very good administration, but it is 2/3 of the entire administration of the European Union. The Union has about 55,000 people working for it. 36,000 work for the Commission. So it's inevitable we get the largest number of complaints. Nevertheless, the rate of compliance with the Commission last year was 82%, the same as the average. It has moved steadily up. So one other example of what we're doing is to push the frontiers of good administration forward and to promote what was said earlier, which I think is a very important part of our mission, how to promote a culture of service, a mentality in the European civil service that says the state is there to serve citizens and not the other way around. And that I would give you as another concrete example of what the Ombudsman has been doing for the last 10 years. Do I have a minute or not?
30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay. One question was, what kind of a profile do I want the future Ombudsman to have? I would answer by saying everything I've told you what I've been trying to do in the past 10 years, in fact, gives you a composite figure of what I think would be the challenge for new Ombudsman, and I'm sure the new Ombudsman will be able to go much further than we have, building on whatever successes and also on our failures. We are there, in fact, to be built upon and to be pursued forward, and I hope that this will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikiforos. Nikiforos Diamandouros, European Ombudsman, who is wrapping up his 10-year career as such. And beware anybody who's trying to fill his position. Those are big shoes to fill. And I don't know if I should wish it on anybody. It's a tough job.
Size 43.
Size 43. Ladies and gentlemen, and to all those who are across Europe in those 30 European Parliament offices and those watching also streaming on the internet, this has been to me, a fulfilling 3 hours. As a Euronews talk show host that I usually only have 10 minutes, as I will this afternoon, to examine the issue of tax evasion. Today we had 3 hours to deal with it, but still, as you can see, there are many facets to it, and there's more to discuss at the reception afterward. It's a matter of channeling this anger and this energy and creativity and dreams into something concrete, either through the Ombudsman or through petitions or through your own grassroots initiative. This is very important in this year of the citizen, European citizen, and next year especially for this European Parliament election, that if we don't get a very strong turnout, that is going to be a very difficult time for the European Union. So we need to see as much activism as possible, and there I'm speaking a little bit editorially as a European citizen. Thank you very much for being part of this, and see you next year. Thank you.